Welcome to Excel magic trick number 777. Hey, if you want to download this workbook, click on the link below the video. In this video here, wow, we have a huge video. I'm going to do all sorts of examples of how to use the SUMPRODUCT function. I'm going to start easy with the basics and then get a little bit more advanced. Now, SUMPRODUCT. Sorry, I'm a little bit sick shooting this video. But SUMPRODUCT, well, they named the function smartly, sum the product. OK, let's see how to do this example longhand, and then we'll see how to use the sum product to make a single cell calculation. We have units and prices. So what we usually do is we highlight some cells. In the active cell, we say equals 2 cells to my left times 1 cell to my left. To populate all the formulas, I hold Control and tap Enter. Then I click in this cell and hit the keyboard shortcut for AutoSum, Alt equals. All right, so we used a column, did individual calculations, and added. Now notice what's happening here. Column, column. Column with units, column with prices. The two first cells multiplied times each other. Enter F2. The second two cells in the two ranges. Enter F2. This third two cells in the array is another word to call the ranges. So really, we're multiplying two ranges and then adding. So multiply, 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 and then add. So down here I did it multiply plus, multiply plus, multiply plus. So really the way the sum product will work is it'll take two arrays. First do the multiplication, right? Get the answer, and then add. That's why it's called sum product. I sometimes think it should be called product sum because it multiplies first and then add. But really, it means sum all of the products. Here it is, equals sum product. Now notice the screen tip, array, comma, array, comma, array. So you can multiply many arrays. And it does say array, which means later when you get into the realm of array formulas, this argument can handle arrays. Now, this video isn't so much about array form. It's just about the sum product. But boom, one cell, we simply highlight the first. Same dimensioned array, meaning one column, 4 rows. And then I hit a comma. And then get the next one. These are the same size or dimensions on these arrays, and thus the sum product will work. And when I hit Enter, that is awesome. One cell substitutes for an entire column and then a sum function. Now, I'm on the sheet sum product. Let's go to sum product 2. Here's another example. We have the bills. And here's how many we collected for the day. We have 5 100s, 20 20s, 22 10s, 5 5s, and 38 10s. So really, we want to multiply each one of these and then add. So the sum product simply does it for us. Array 1. Horizontal, same size dimension, 1 row, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns, and then a comma, array 2, and Enter. So there's a quick, beautiful example when to use sum product. Let's go back over to the sheet sum product. All right, now our second example. We use sum product because the nature of the calculation warrants it. Now, this is from finance. We usually have probability for, we've estimated the economic state to be weak, normal, or boom. And so we've estimated some probabilities. A massively subjective process, but nevertheless, people do it. And then we have estimated the return for each stock in each state. So here's what you really want to do. And if you're learning a textbook, you say, oh, the probability times the return we expect plus the probability times the return plus probability times return. This is actually a type of weighted average type of calculation. But that's how you make that calculation. Again, you notice two same-sized arrays or ranges multiplied and then added. And so we can simply use sum product in its place. Array 1, comma, array 2. And there we go. Don't even have to put that last parentheses. Enter. All right, another example. And I'm going to have to make this a little bit smaller. When to use sum product? Well, the dimensions of the array sum product must be the same. If they're not, you can use a multiplication symbol. So here's a little bit more complicated example from finance. We have stock 1, stock 2. Here's our probabilities. Here's our returns we've estimated for each state of the economy. And here's the weight of our portfolio. So watch this. If you know how to use mixed cell references, you can highlight this excuse me, whole range right here in the active cell equals, well, the stock return, and as we copy this formula down and over, it'll move relatively, times the column header, which needs to be locked when we go down, but not to the side. So with my cursor next to C22, I hit F4 key and lock the row reference, but not the column, times, and then the row header, which needs to be locked when we go this way, but not when we go down. That box, when we copy this formula down, that little dancing ants box needs to move. So we need to only hit the F4 1, 2, 3 times, lock the column, but not the row. I'm going to populate all of the cells using Control and Enter. And then we add. And so this would give us our Alt equals, and then highlight this range. That gives us the expected return. Now, the problem for the sum product is these are not the same ranges. But would you believe it? If you know how to use mixed cell references, and you often have column headers and row headers, you can just use the multiplication symbol. So I'm going to use sum product, highlight the first ray, and it does not matter which order you do. Multiplication symbol. So notice it's treating it as just a single array. Multiply, multiply. As long as you use those multiplication symbols, it will work. I hit Enter. That is simply awesome. Now, oh no, these are different. Don't get tricked by formatting. No, they're the same. All right, now the next example of sum product is in earlier versions of Excel, people would use sum product to count or sum with more than one criteria. Now, we don't so much have to do it anymore because we have sum ifs and count ifs and average ifs, etc. But there's lots of examples where what we learn here will help us greatly, because sum product can handle arrays. But there's some notes there. I'll let you read that. The first thing I want to look at, though, I'm going to delete this. Here's our situation. We need to count or sum, and we have two criteria. First criteria for sales rep is give us sales rep 1. Second criteria for product, we need product 1. So if we said SR1, P1, we'd get probably this one and this one. Now, to understand how to use the sum product, we need to talk about Boolean logic or common sense sometimes. But it's really Boolean logic. Now, what happens when you give either, and by the way, let me just put this into edit mode. Here's the sum ifs. This is how you do it now. You say the sum range. Well, we want to add up all the sales. And then criteria range 1, there it is, the sales rep. Criteria 1, I highlighted that cell right there. Criteria 2, criteria range 2, there it is. And then finally, the criteria 2, I highlighted that. Now, sum ifs is you 100% want to use this if you're in this situation, because there's, and you're in Excel 2007 or 10, because the sum ifs is much faster calculating, more efficient at calculating than the sum product. But in earlier versions, we didn't have the S version of sum ifs, so we had to use sum product. So I want to show you the sum product to solve this same problem, because maybe you're going to work on an earlier computer, but also because later we'll have to use sum product because sum ifs can't do everything. But let's just think about this. What did this do? What the sum ifs did is it went through here and it goes true, match the criteria, false, 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 true, true. And then it went over and got this. It kept going down. False, false, true, true. So it went over and got this. So really it got the 12 and the 11 for the adding part of this. And when I Control Enter, it gets 23. So that basic common sense idea of how to track criteria through two columns. And by the way, they don't have to be columns. They can be turned on their side. They could be row, row. But they do have to be the same dimensions. That idea of going true, true, because there were two truths, 1, 2, we're allowed to use this. That is the secret to understanding how the sum product does some of its more fancy formulas, and also Boolean logic. Now look at this. Here's a little string here. We got a true here, but a false here. So really, true, false, this true right here in this array. And then you look over here, we had product 1 was our criteria. So false, false, true. It's only when you get a 1 times a 1 times the corresponding value in this value that you're allowed to count. That's the Boolean logic way of doing it. Similarly, when we get to this next one, right? 1 times 1 times 11. You're allowed to count it. So 11, 1 times 1 times 12, plus 1 times 1 times 11 is 23. Now, I want to explicitly do this because when we do our tricks in SUMPRODUCT, when we say, does this criteria match here, it won't come out 1. So we have to do an additional trick. I want to just try it here. I want to do equals, and then this right here. Does that equal relative cell reference to this? And then I'm going to hit F4. Control Enter, and then I'm going to drag it down. Now I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to say equals this, relative cell reference equals this, and then F4. Control Enter, and copy it down. You could see only where we get true, true 12 should we be adding it here, and true, true 11 we should be adding it here. But our sum product can't handle true, so we have to coax a 1 and a 0 out of true. Now, there are lots of ways to do this. You can multiply times 1. You can divide by 1. You can raise it to the first power. But the fastest calculating way is to use a double negative. The negative sign is a unitary operator. You put two of them together. And just because the people at Microsoft calculated it in the way they or programmed it in the way it did, it is the fastest way to convert trues and falses to 1s and 0s. I'm going to put a double negative. Now, that won't work because it's a unitary operator. It would only operate on this. And we need to get this whole thing to evaluate to true first. So we have to put parentheses. Now, if you know your order of operations or Excel's order of operations, a comparative operator comes way after the negative sign. So that will do it. This part right here, if I highlight this and hit the F9 key, you can see it's true. And then I'm going to Control Z. If now I highlight this whole thing here and hit F9, you can see it does convert it to 1. Control Z to undo that. That F9 trick is good because you can see parts of a formula, how they evaluate. I'm going to Control Enter and double click and send it down. Now, if I'm fancy here, notice I see this and this. I want to copy this over here, so I'm going to click here and hit F4 and lock it going down, but not to the side. That way, this goes down, and it's locked there. But when I move it over here, the criteria will move to there. And this, of course, will move relatively throughout the whole action. So Control Enter, double click and send it down, and drag it over. Here is how it works in Boolean logic. We say equals 1 times 0 times 16. That is how our Boolean array multiplying with trues and falses converted to 1s and 0s, that's how it works. So 1 times 0 obviously is 0. So as soon as you get any false anywhere when you're using and, this is and criteria, that means they both have to be true, right? A 0 anywhere. If you have 5 criteria, a 0 anywhere negates this. It's not going to be counted. So this, of course, is going to be 0. I drag it down. We get the 12 and the 11, and then we add. Now, this is important for people that are learning this for the first time to go through and see exactly how all of this works. Now, let's put it all together. This is exciting. Whoops. To count equals sum product and the first array. Well, we have to put a double negative and open parentheses. And notice it says array. It can handle this. Watch this. I'm going to highlight this whole column and equal sign and click on this. Now, if you know how to use sum ifs and count ifs, the criteria has to be separated by a comma, but not with sum product. You're actually doing calculations right directly on the range or array. Now, the thing about this is this is a normal logical formula. Logical formulas, any comparative operator between a cell and a cell, is what you normally do, gives you a true or false. But here, because we did a whole range, this makes it an array, array operation. So when I highlight this, it's not going to give me one true or one false. It's going to give me an array. Now when I hit F9 here, this is an array. You can see we're using array syntax. Curly brackets always house the array. Semicolons means row, and commas later will, if I don't think we'll see it in this video, but a comma means column. Now the way I always remember it is comma starts with a C and column starts with a C. So that's how I memorize it. And then I just go, oh yeah, the other thing, semicolon, is the row. Now I'm going to quickly undo this, Control Z, because you don't want to leave that hard-coded in. I'm going to highlight this and hit, actually I have to close parentheses. Highlight this and hit F9, and you can see, sure enough, just as we had over here, just as we had here. Control Z. Now we do our second array. That's array 1, comma, to get to the next array. Double negative, open parenthesis. I'm going to scroll over here. Equals criteria number 2. Close parentheses, and that's it. That's the sum. That's if you're going to have to use sum product, using those double negatives, and this construction here is efficient. So there's 2. Now I'm going to copy this, and we want to do the same thing we did down here. I copied it in edit mode. Escape. Click here, F2 to put it in edit mode. Control V. Click right here. Now we have array 2. We want array 3, comma. So we simply type a comma, get to make sure the screen tip says array 3, and then highlight. Very nice. So that whole little discussion there is how Boolean logic and a lot of the cooler formulas with sum product works. Now I'm going to scroll over here. It's our next example. OK, so here, sorry for sniffing. I'm just sicker than anything. This was to show you how people used to do it before sum ifs and count ifs and average ifs. Now we're going to see an example that sum ifs just can't do. Right? Sometimes you've got to use sum product because sum ifs and count ifs can't handle arrays. All right. And here's the problem. We have 2009 as our criteria, and we have serial number dates. These are number of days. And we just need to match a part of it, the 2009. Now I'm going to show you the extra column method first and talk about the year function. Year is awesome. Serial number. See? Year function, smart. It knows that under a date is a serial number. Number of days since December 31st, 1899. So serial number, I'm going to click right there. It will just flat out extract the year. Control Enter. Double click and count it, drag it down. Now you could, here do what we're counting. So count ifs. And now the criteria range would be this. And people do this all the time. They add extra columns to their data set, which is no problem. However, sometimes you cannot for space. And sometimes the data sets are too big, and you don't want to add lots of extra calculations like this. So actually, sometimes people add extra columns to speed things up, but that's not a topic in this class. Again, if you don't want to add lots of extra columns like this, we'll see how the sum product can get around this. So countifs can handle this because this is just a normal range. A range of cells countif can handle. But if we start doing those true, false, double negative arrays inside of countif, it won't work. You can't put years function inside of countifs like you can the sum product. All right, so there's comma. Criteria 1 is going to be this. Comma, criteria 2, I'm simply going to highlight this column here. That's criteria range 2, comma, and then the criteria is Julie. So we get 3. Now, how do we do this without an extra column? Well, the years function is the trick. So we say equals year. And I'm going to highlight this whole column, Control-Shift-Down arrow. And I have to close this off and just look at what this does. I'm going to hit F9. There's our array. So if you Control-Z put in the serial number argument for year, that argument is expecting one serial number. As soon as you put a range in here, this converts this to a non-normal formula to an array formula. And you can hit F9 and see it is returning multiple years. It just looked through this whole column and did the 9s, the 8, etc. Control Z. So how do we match that array inside of SUMPRODUCT? Well, you have to do a logical formula. You have to say, are any of those in that array equal to this? And when you highlight this and hit F9, you can see, sure enough, there's our array of trues and falses. Control Z. That is not going to work. Notice we have an equal sign. We can't just come out here and go double negative, because that double negative is attached to this. This will calculate before that. So if we want that to calculate first, we have to say boom. And then when we highlight this and hit F9, there is our lovely arrays of 1s and 0s. Control Z. Now you can come over here and do SUMPRODUCT. There's array number 1, comma, array number 2, double negative, open parentheses. This column, we're building arrays inside of SUMPRODUCT, so we have to just put the comparative operator directly on the range, and then click on our criteria. Any comparative operator, greater than, equal to, could go there also. All right, and then close that off and enter. 3. Now to add, you copy the whole thing, and you simply add our third. That we have array 2, so I'm going to 3. I'm going to type a comma. There's the array 3, and what do we want? Phone calls. So there's our SUMPRODUCT, extracting, in essence, year criteria from serial dates in a single cell. Counting, adding. Now let's up the ante here. I wonder if I copied this here and pasted it down here. I think this has the same dimension. Look at that. So I just copied this cell right here. Not in edit mode. I copied the actual cell, because notice these are all relative cell references. But the relationship between that cell calculated and all this data right down here, if I copy this cell, is the same as down here. So when I put it into edit mode, boom. OK, now we have to add one more criteria here. Actually, I didn't want to do that. That was just silly. I'm going to delete that. Here we have a completely different situation. Sorry. We have Fab and 2009. Well, we saw how to use the year function to get from serial numbers of the year. Well, there is a month function, but it gives you month 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 12. And our criteria is given as FEB. So we're going to have to use something different. I'm going to use something called the text function. Right? We're going to do the extra column method, and then I'll show you how to do it with SUMPRODUCT. And this is pretty cool, because we're going to see how to use the text function. Equals text. But before we can do that, let's talk about custom number formatting. I'm going to highlight this range right here and Control 1 to go to Format Cells. Number, date. Now, if we click on this right here, notice it says Friday, January 2nd, 2009. That's that date right there. That's not quite what we want. Notice our criteria up here is given as Fab. OK, no problem. I'm going to come down to Custom. And I'm going to highlight this cell right here and just hit the delete key. Let's just watch what happens to the sample here. If I type month, which is M, there's one, month. OK, so 2 M's would give us 0, 1, and month. No way. The secret custom number format for 3 abbreviation of a month for 3 digits, 3 characters is MMM. Now let's do Y. And you can see an 09. Y. Y. And 3 Y's will give us the year. Let's just click OK. What? That's pretty useless there. But guess what? It's not going to be useless when we use the text function and we use that custom number format. Because that means we can look at a serial number with the text function and show January 2009 in a single cell and copy down the column. We will then be able to use that to match against 2 pieces. So I'm going to Control Z here just to leave those dates. And I'm going to come over here, equals text. Excuse me. tab. The value, text function works on any number, and you can use any number there. That's why it says value and not serial number, comma. And you can put any custom number format here. And it has to be in double quotes. So double quote, and I'm going to type MMM year, year, year. End double quote, close parentheses. Now, date custom number formatting is easy. M's are months, Y's are years, and days are, that's right, I heard someone out there say it, D's. Control Enter, double click and send it down. Oops, I won't double click. Now, what I really want is trues and falses. So I'm going to edit the cell at the top. Actually, we're not going to do that. We're going to come over here, and we can now use count if. And let's see how to do that. Count ifs. Count ifs, criteria range 1. Well, OK, this one right here, comma. But what in the world is the criteria? It's simply, and in the right order, February, ampersand, 2009. That is joining two criteria. If I highlight this and hit the F9, oh, that is so cool. It's exactly like all the criteria in this column over here. Control Z. So now that's cool because we took two criteria and just slapped it into one. Comma, the criteria range 2 will be for Julie. So I'm highlighting that. Criteria range 2, comma, criteria 2 is Julie. All right, and then Control Enter, and we can see there's 2. Now, how do we do that all together? We come up here, and we have to go equals text of this whole column here. Same concept as the year, right? As soon as you slap more than one value into this argument for text, you're jumped into the realm of arrays. It means it's going to deliver lots of answers. Comma, format text in double quotes. MMM, year, 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 and double quote, close parentheses. Now, let's just highlight this and hit the F9 key. Oh, that is so cool. Right in a single cell, I can see lots of values. Control Z. By the way, if I enter this, I get a value error. The reason why is because Excel doesn't know how to display lots of values in one cell. If you really wanted to enter it, which is kind of meaningless here, you'd Control Shift and enter. That's a special keyboard shortcut that says I'm entering an array into a single cell. It's kind of, and if you look up here, you can see the curly brackets. That means you use Control Shift Enter to enter this into the cell. Later, we're not going to talk about array formulas here, but that is how to get it to enter. Normally, when I'm doing this, just as I'm building a formula, I just hit Enter, and I say, oh, I don't care about the value error. It's just saying you can't put lots of values into a single cell. Now, what do we have to do? We have to say, is anything in that range equal to, boom, that ampersand this. And when I highlight this, by the way, again, you can go F9 and see, sure enough, that's working. When you highlight this, it'll just give us a bunch of trues and falses. F9, Control Z. And we need to force this equal sign to operate first. So I'm going to put order of operation, and then double negative in front of this. Now, when I highlight this, that's the hard part of the sum product formula we're building. So I always like to build it first like this. Hit F9, and there it is. That's what I'm looking for. Control Z. Now I put it inside of the sum product. Again, this argument is awesome. It says array, and it's telling the truth. It can handle arrays. If you put this piece into, or even this piece into the count ifs, it just doesn't even give you a polite error message. It just says, I can't do that. All right, so there's our first arrays of 1s and 0s to multiply by what? Comma. We need to still get the Julie, the sales up, so I highlight that. Array equals to Julie. Oh, yeah, I forgot to put the parentheses and the double negative. So I'll go double negative, open parentheses. That's our second array, comma. Finally, array 3, we need to, we're just counting here. So we only need that one, those two. So notice here it goes 1. Whenever it sees a 1 times 1, that's 1, which is a count of 1. I'm going to copy this, and for summing, escape, click right here. We'll come to the end. Array 2, I type a comma, I get to array 3. So there's my comma. And I simply, if I want to add them, I highlight those. Control Enter, and there are 4, because there should be 2 matches, right? February 2009, Julie 2. I can't see it in my delirious 6. Oh, there it is. February, Julie 2. So yeah, that's right there. Okay, those are 2 examples. The last 2 examples are when to switch over to some products when some ifs won't work and you don't want to add an extra column. Now we do have one last great example for when to example. I'm going to click on the sheet SP3. Now this is a weighted average cost example. Now what is weighted average cost? If you buy inventory, one at 13, one at 15, one at 12.5. There are many ways to value inventory and calculate what cost of goods sold should be on your income statement. One way is weighted average cost. You simply add up these and divide by 3. Now, there's 3 of them, right? Each one didn't cost the same amount. So 1350 would be our answer. Now, data usually doesn't come simple like this. It usually comes in data sets with field names at the top. So for example, we have a date, that what product we bought, what the quantity was, and how much we paid each. Well, the first problem here is how do we add up all of the cost for product 9? Well, what we need to do is go through this column and say, OK, product 9, product 9, product 9, true, 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 and then say this times this. So just for this small example, I'd say this times this plus this times this. That would give me the total I paid, right? Because this is the quantity and this was the price. In fact, let's Control-Shift down here arrow and Control-Shift 4 to add some dollar signs to differentiate. This is the quantity. This is the price, right? So you get the idea. The problem here is we have to multiply only certain items in these 2 ranges. Perfect for the sum product. Because we can say, is anything in this column equal to 9? If it is, then take the corresponding item from this array and multiply it by the corresponding item in this array. Now, technically, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to multiply. We're going to have to say anything in this range equal to 9 with our array, double negative, times this times this. So let's just go over and see if we can add up all of the cost we paid for product 9. And then we'll worry about dividing by how we're going to figure out how many we actually quantity-wise. Let's just do the adding of the total cost. So equals sum product. And let's see. I'm going to scroll over here. The first part of this is going to be double negative, open parentheses, and then this column. Control-Shift down arrow F4. Anything in there that's a locked range equal to one cell to my left. So that'll be product 1. And as we copy it down, obviously that will change. That means the trues and falses will change as we copy this down. Right? So that's going to establish the true-false pattern. Then we simply, for array 2 and 3, slap these 2 ranges in. So I'm going to comma array 2, quantity, Control-Shift down arrow F4, comma array 3, that's the price, Control-Shift down arrow F4. So again, just visually here, it's going to say true, so it'll take this times this. So it'll be 1 times this times this. And that will give us, on this one day, what we paid for product, total cost we paid for product 9. All right, I'm going to just enter this, see if we can get the total. That's the total. I'm going to double click and send it down, come to the end, click there in F2, make sure I got all my ranges locked right. They look correct. Now, that's not how you do weighted average cost. You also have to divide this total paid by the total number we purchased. Well, we can do, we don't need anything fancy here because we can do sum if or sum ifs and say, find anything in this product that's product 9, and then add up all the corresponding values in this range. So I'm going to come over here and divide this by sum. Now, you can use sum if or sum ifs, whichever one you want. I always like sum ifs because the screen tip is more polite. So the sum range, well, I'm adding up units. Control Shift down arrow F4. Comma, the criteria range, well, I need to for this calculation right here, I need product 1, so I have to highlight this. Control Shift down arrow F4. So criteria range 1 are all of the products. And then comma, the criteria will simply be one cell to my left. Control Enter. So that's a pretty fancy formula for weighted average cost of weighted average cost. Now the beauty of this, and I can check my cell references, is that I didn't have to add some extra columns, right? And there's an example if you download this workbook of the extra column method. All right, that's a lot about SUMPRODUCT and how SUMPRODUCT can really do some magic for us straight as a sum product, like back over here. This one right here, just multiplying two ranges, right? Or over here we saw, if you were in earlier versions of Excel, adding. So we did this formula. Counting with more than one criteria was hard, so SUMPRODUCT came to the rescue. We also saw SUMPRODUCT really can handle things that SUMIFs and COUNTIFs cannot. And finally, we saw this great weighted average cost calculation. All right, we'll see you next trick.